everybody. We're glad that you're here for our meeting of the Westchester County Police Reform and Reinvention Task Force. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. I'm joined by members of our County Executive Committee. Ken Jenkins is on the line. We have Blanca Lopez, Crystal Collins, a host of our support people here, and then we have other individuals and our two co-leaders of the committee, Mayo Bartlett and Leroy Frazier, will go through all of the appropriate introductions. My purpose is not just to welcome you, but just to highlight that this meeting is a very important meeting, and as this committee starts to get into the meat of what this is about. I want to thank everybody who's agreed to serve. You've already had, in most cases, about 2 months worth of involvement in this and been committed through different committees and so forth. And many of you have had a long time attachment to the host of these issues at hand. We know that we've established a December 31st deadline. It's not a hard and fast deadline, but it's a practical deadline, because whatever comes out of the recommendations and gets fashioned into the plan that satisfies the governor's metric, we have to present that to the Board of Legislators, and we want our colleagues in the legislature to have sufficient time to be able to evaluate it. And so that's why we have that December 31st target. And so as we see, the weeks tick by pretty quickly. But I just want to reinforce how much value I put in each of you as individuals. You have very different points of view out there. And I know, we have folks all across the spectrum of philosophy and life experience. And that is exactly what I wanted on this committee. I wanted people of different backgrounds to debate. I expect the debate at times to be heated, because you feel passionately about the things that you believe to be true. And you need that give and take if we're going to have the best possible result. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the two gentlemen that have agreed. Perhaps they're having second thoughts too late, who've agreed to co-chair this committee. And I'm very grateful to both Leroy and Mayo for their leadership. And I also, just before I step away and I'll get on, you'll see me up on the Brady Bunch grid there in a second. I want to thank the members of our county executive team for their great work. And I know we have other folks in our administration who are here who are doing a terrific job all together, but the heavy lifting is yet ahead of us. Thank you all. And gentlemen, please chair the meeting.
Thank you, Steve.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to be recording today's meeting, and Leroy and I would like to take this as an opportunity to thank everybody for your dedication. And as County Executive said, we've been doing this for at least 2 months at this point. And having attended virtually all of the meetings of the working groups, I just want to thank everybody for your dedication and for the hard work, for the research that's going on, and for the work that everybody has put in outside of the actual meetings, and it's invaluable. And again, just I would like to reiterate that what we're doing today is not our final report by any stretch of the imagination, but it's an opportunity for the working groups to share information with one another so that we have an idea of what's been done thus far. Many of the recommendations and suggestions are still in work in progress, but it gives us an opportunity to see sort of where things are heading, and nothing's set in stone at this point. The other thing that I definitely want to focus on is the fact that we want to pay attention to the reimagining component as much as possible. It is not simply for police reform, but it's an opportunity for us to reimagine what the police can be in a perfect world. And we can shoot for the stars here in terms of making sure that we fortify the Westchester County Police Department so that it is the best that it can possibly be, and that it can be a model for other police departments. In doing so, we want to highlight the things that are being done well in the Westchester County Police Department. We want to look at some things that are being done that can be improved upon, and some of the things that we may not yet be doing, we want to explore to make sure that we're doing everything that can be done so that we are implementing best practices in law enforcement. So with that being said, I look forward to hearing the presentations, and I look forward to continuing to work with all of you. And thank you again for your time and your dedication.
Good afternoon, everyone. I join Mayo in thanking all of you for your participation, your dedication, and your hard work. I got to tell you that I'm relatively new to the inner workings of Westchester criminal justice. I haven't been getting involved really over the last couple of years, but I hasten to add that I have certainly learned a lot from participating in the working groups that Mayo and I have attended. And I'm impressed by a number of things that are being done both in the academy and in all areas throughout Westchester. These are important times. I don't have to tell you that we didn't, the county executive didn't just say, I think I want to do this. I think he did it in response to where we are in 2020, where we are and what is going on across the country and across the different places that we all either know or have people and colleagues that we know and what they're going through. I'm gonna go off the path a moment and bear with me. I went for my physical today, and I'm happy to report that outside of my golf swing, this body's working pretty well. It's not perfect, but it's doing things okay because I've taken care of it and applied attention to it. I think, and while I was sitting there, I thought about working well is not just good, not good enough. That it'd be good for me to look at different things that I can do going forward as my age matures. I think that that's similar to what we're doing here because we're going to look at that term reimagine. We're going to look at the way things are being done here in Westchester, highlight them for the rest of the state and even the country, and look at how policing can be done. We'll make a report. We'll note those who agree and disagree with some of the findings. But if we come together and do as we have been doing thus far, and I congratulate you on your participation and involvement thus far, and if you continue to do that, I'm confident that this process will be well worth doing and something that we'll be able to look back on proudly. So with that, those opening remarks, we're going to begin by going through and allowing each of the working groups to report based on the template that they have filled out, and you each have designated a reporter who will be presenting the remarks. I asked the entire task force to be patient, and we want to go through all of the reports before we have additional discussion or what have you, so that everything can get out there. You may be from one task force and want to comment on what is going on or what was presented in the other. I would ask that you wait until all of them are done because there's going to be some overlap. But for purposes of proceeding along in an orderly fashion, we just ask that you be patient until all the reports are in. Everybody, you have up until 15 minutes to present your report. And actually, there will be a 5-minute question and action on at the end of each of those working group reports. But then additional stuff is what I'm talking about, waiting until everybody is done. So that's 20 minutes each, and that will take us through most of the afternoon. And so with that, we'll begin with the first one, and it's no particular order. We're going down the list in which we made the list. Transparency being the first one. And our reporter for transparency is whom cover?
It's going to be Michael Hagan and Paul Hood.
We have a tag team for transparency. Michael Hagan and Paul Hood. The floor is yours, gentlemen.
Okay, I'll start. Good afternoon, everyone, to co-chairs Mayor Bartlett and Leroy Frazier and the rest of the members of this task force. My name is Paul Hood. I'll be doing this presentation with Sergeant Michael Hagan from the Westchester County Police Department, the union president. We are tasked with an awesome responsibility, and we had 3 very spirited meetings where we there was a lot of back and forth where we did not agree on everything. But that was all right because it made for some very positive discussions. With that being said, we are going to go into the template. And first one was identifying some key issues and needs. And one of the main ones was talking about the use of body cam and dash cams for the cars. It has been brought to our attention that since 1992, the Washington County Police Department has been using dash cams in the patrol cars only, not the unmarked cars. And since 2017, they've been using the body cam, and that's on every police officer, that's every patrol officer that's in uniform. Then we brought up the topic of the Civilian Complaint Review Board, which is a hot topic, but we understand that's being that's going to be addressed by another subcommittee. And with that, piggybacking on that was we want to make it how we can make it more transparent when somebody wanted to file a complaint against a particular officer, somebody in the department. And it was brought to our attention also that that can be done online. You do not have to walk into the police department and face anybody there. And it can be done online. You could do an email, but you will be contacted by somebody from internal affairs. By being able to do it online, it takes away some of the fear that people may have when they want to make a complaint. Next thing was we talked about the continuing law enforcement training. And, we brought up that the county does do, you have to certify every year what you're shooting. And they also have 3 days that are required of in-service training. But we also understand that may be being dealt with by another subcommittee. Sergeant Hagan?
Next couple things were a county registry of police officers. There was discussion about creating an online list of former officers who were convicted of a crime, terminated for cause, or left the department with charges pending. So we were back and forth on this. Some of us believe that that's handled on a state level. DCJS already does that, and others who, are looking for the county to have it also. FOIL requests, more information or documents provided pursuant to FOIL should be provided at no cost to the public. Example, college kids who requested documents for a school project were informed that documents would cost about $800 to put together. Those are things that I don't think there's a lot of disagreement about within the committee. When it comes to the cost, I think that's something that, we get from the administration. But putting things online so that people don't have to foil them, whatever's relevant, I don't think there's a lot of pushback on putting it online. Information initiative website does not provide adequate free information about the WCPD. Example, its objectives, policies, and practices on the website. I think our website does have, a lot of stuff. If there's things that we could do better, obviously, I don't think there's any pushback on that either. Licensing of police officers due to potential loss of life of police officers and civilians, and the level of training of police officers, they're required to and should have licensing by either county or the state. I believe they are licensed. You can call it a license, you can call it a certification. There was some back and forth conversation on that. Again, some of us believe in that. That's a state. That's the state's job to do, and it's already done by the state. And others who would like to see it on a county level.
Okay. The members of the subcommittee on transparency, we have identified a preliminary list of areas in which the WCPD may improve. It should be noted, although an item appears on the list, one or more subcommittee members might have existing concerns, and thus there still may be issues to resolve. As I said, we've had some very spirited meetings, and a lot of going back and forth. But like I said, man, the outcome was very positive because it made for really good conversation. We talked about the body cams and the dash cams. We want to ensure that there's a dash cam on every appropriate vehicle, and every patrol officer has a body cam. And that's been instituted for the last 3 years. The Civilian Complaint Review Board, we know it's being addressed by another committee. However, the Police Advisory Board right now is the CC department. The civilian complaints want to ensure that there is an online system for the filing of complaints or compliments, and that it is user-friendly. Currently, the residents may file a complaint by email, in person, or by phone, or via letter. And we also discussed creating a public online database of police officers' disciplinary history of substantiated complaints, but there was no final agreement on that issue yet. And in addition to that, we talked about continuing the law enforcement training. We discussed more training aside from the police academy and the shooting certifications and the 3 in-service days. We also talked about maybe intermittently having throughout the officer's years, throughout his career, undergoing additional psychological and physical exams. However, we understand also that this is being addressed by another committee.
The county registry was another one that, again, I think I kind of hit this point when we talked about it in the discussion. Creating a police registry of officers who were fired from a police department, not hired due to being terminated, or leaving the department with charges pending. It needs a legal analysis if the task force decides to pursue it, because the county legislation might be necessary to get local municipalities to comply if they don't voluntarily do so. Again, there was back and forth discussion about who should do it. FOIL request, I just went into that, just provide more information, typically only available through FOIL request online, so that they won't be cost prohibitive to the public. More information online on the website would cut down hours of manpower used to locate, review, and redact information. That information would be provided at no cost. It would include, but be limited to, statistical analysis, policy manual, which contains the use of force policy, possibly a link to DCJS training manual if it's available. Otherwise, maybe the curriculum that's taught at the academy, and documents and reports typically only provided through FOIL requests. Establish a special needs mental health autism program. Some departments have, you can go in and let them know that you have somebody at your residence who has a special need, or there's something going on at your residence. This way, when the responding officers go to the residence, they know what to expect, or they can expect something if it's a little bit out of the ordinary. Licensing of police officers, again, I just went into that discussion, so I don't think I have to do that one again. Pass it off to Paul.
Okay. Just to add on to what Mike was saying, was as far as adding to the website the area of special needs and mental health, or whatever the case may be. It's very helpful if we have that area and the residents or civilians can fill in that information, because when an officer is dispatched to a particular scene of an incident, if they have that information, or the more information that they have available when they respond, then they'll be better equipped to handle the situation. So some of the opportunities that we see within this area, we've looked at the websites of 43 police departments in the county. Most provide very little or no information about the police force. So as far as transparency, we have the opportunity to provide the public with a lot more information about Westchester County Police Department, and opportunities for the public to engage with and feel a part of. And I'd like to add at this point, when we look at the county's website right now, we are way above the curve compared to everybody else right now, as far as what being transparent, what's there. Members of the Transparency Subcommittee agree that this kind of information sharing and community policing will go far in fostering trust and confidence in the Westchester County Police Department and vice versa. The licensing, we might talk about that with DCJS. But one thing that we also thought was important that we came up with was we thought that in addition to the public being able to file a complaint against an officer, we also thought that it'd be a good idea if we provided a link where a civilian would be able to write a complimentary letter to the department. Like if an officer helped them in an incident or helped them, the car broke down someplace or saved their life or got them out of the house in a domestic incident, anything like that, if they felt that they wanted to write a letter to the department on that officer's behalf. We thought that that would be beneficial to the department. It'd be a good idea to add to the website to make the department more transparent. Pass it off to Mike.
All right, considerations. As pointed out above, we should be undertaking initiatives to make more information available online, provide the public with more opportunity to engage with members of the WCPD, county police. County police appears to be in agreement with this notion, and we understand that the commissioner is considering making more information available online and creating ways in which the public can interact or engage with the county police. Some of the challenges observed, some disagreement on how we define reform and reimagine. The phrase, does the phrase mean we start from scratch and begin as if there's no department? Or do we begin by acknowledging the successes and the failures of the department? Or is it a combination of both? Another challenge was any statistics provided to the public should include an analysis such as that provided to the police board, because there are people who use the highways in the county. They're often not Westchester residents. So, we had big discussion about that. And if you actually watch one of the last Board of Legislator public safety meetings, they also discussed the fact that, the parkways are not just used by county residents, which is where a lot of our interaction comes from. But many arrests that are made have nothing to do with the reason why a particular car was stopped. Example, maybe there's an open warrant, a family court offense, or a mandatory VTL arrest, like a DWI or something like that. Nonetheless, the subcommittee agrees that the information which tends to illustrate that the county police is performing its functions the right way is something to highlight to the public and should be made available to the public with any appropriate redactions. There's a split on that licensing at the county level. There's a disagreement as to whether this issue would be preempted by state law. If it is, there'll be many hurdles, procedural, political, and the state legislature will have to pass a law to create a licensing scheme for police officers. Again, I think it exists, but that's some of the debate and some of the challenges that we see.
All right, what is currently working? Right now, everything is going well. There's always room for improvement. So the dash cams, which have been in existence since 1992, and the body cams for every patrol officer, right now they're a very effective program. Oh, okay. And the Westchester County Police also reported statistical analysis to the police board on a semi-annual basis, which shows no anomaly or race-based approach in their car stops and arrests.
That's it.
Any additional information from anybody else on the committee that want to add anything? Co-chairs or anybody?
Any questions? First of all, thank you. I think that you guys put a tremendous amount of time, obviously, and a lot of detail. And these are some issues that generated a lot of discussion. And thank both of you for taking the time to give the presentation. And I thought it was an outstanding presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If anyone has questions, in order to save us a little bit of time, would you be able to enter them in chat? In order to access the chat, please click the icon that looks like a word balloon. It should be appearing over your WebEx screen.
That's for any other members of the task force?
Yes.
See any coming up?
As of right now, we have no questions.
Okay, all right, well, we can come back to other things later. Should we move on to accountability? And I think the presenter,
Lila.
Lila Curtin.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, co-chairs and fellow members. I am the designated reporter for the Accountability Working Group. So far, we have met a total of 4 times. We've had some guest speakers. We've met with John Nona, Justin Avery, and Jason Whitehead from the County Attorney's Office. From the County Police PBA, we've met with Mike Hagan and Steve Smith. And we had a really good meeting with Mina Malik, the former executive director of the New York City CCRB, the Civilian Complaint Review Board, which I think everyone found very instructive. And that was a really great meeting. I'll read off our list of outcomes and key issues and needs that we have identified to date. We see a need for transparency to ensure public confidence as a key to achieving accountability. There's a need to review existing mechanisms for disciplining, terminating problem employees as the first step to assess whether or where change is needed. We reviewed the significance of the collective bargaining agreements and how they affect accountability measures, and the significance of existing laws to determine the limits or the possibilities of creating a CCRB type entity for Westchester County. We've considered recommending amendments to existing laws and the possible ramifications of doing so. We've considered implications for municipalities of a centralized CCRB type entity and how those might affect our goals. We've looked at the need for collecting data to assess biases in the enforcement of the disciplinary processes. We're looking at determining how non-disclosure agreements that are affected in a settlement of a disciplinary process may affect an officer's personnel file and whether that would prevent another locality from hiring that officer. We've discussed the importance of ensuring that an independent entity, such as an Office of Police Accountability, can investigate or recommend sanctions in a timely fashion and provide an early warning system to address problematic officers. Our initial recommendations to date are legislation creating mandatory reporting of police misconduct for members of law enforcement, certification or licensure of police officers, as was just discussed by the prior working group. We see that as serving as a measure of proficiency, as a means of streamlining the disciplinary process and changing the culture within a department and within county policing. This could also reduce financial costs for municipalities and certainly increase public confidence and trust in law enforcement agencies. We've discussed enacting a mandatory reporting or duty to intervene law, creating an Office of Police Accountability, which is similar to an Inspector General type role, which would be an independent body with subpoena power to investigate and adjudicate civilian complaints, whistleblower complaints, and violations of the mandatory reporting law if enacted. We have looked at updating the Public Safety Department's website to include a user-friendly link to complaint forms and instructions and details on the complaint process. And we've talked about developing some oversight within the DA's office to review police conduct or misconduct during the arrest or investigatory processes. Some of the opportunities that we have seen within the area We we have gotten an understanding of the county police department's efforts to date in this area. We see leveraging public sentiment for accountability and independence in adjudicating allegations against police misconduct. We looked at, again, as I mentioned, changing cultural impediments that may discourage reporting of misconduct by law enforcement. And perhaps we can relieve local elected officials and municipalities of the responsibility to determine sanctions if there's a centralized review board. Challenges that we have come to observe are the existing laws, the process of obtaining MOUs, memorandums of understanding, which we would envision meeting with local municipalities, a culture that discourages reporting of misconduct by fellow officers, the inconsistency in outcomes of a centralized review board due to different codes amongst the different municipalities, and the cost which would be involved in creating a CCRB. As far as what's working, we found the county police PBA personnel who met with us open and willing to share information. There seems to be a small number of disciplinary actions which may suggest that there is compliance with the department policies and procedures. And it was discussed in this meeting that there were a small number of formal civilian complaints, which may suggest training and oversight has been successful, or may indicate that the public is not aware of how to file a complaint. Some articles were shared within our working group, which can certainly be shared with the larger task force. That's our report.
Lila, thank you very much, and thank you to all of the members of your group as well. A tremendous amount of work that's gone into a lot of thought, and thank you, truly appreciate the report.
So we have no questions for Lila at this time, but we have received 2 questions from Mike and Paul. I don't know if you guys would like to save those until the end or deal with them right now.
We'll come back at them at the end.
Sounds good. Okay. So if anybody has any questions for Lila, please just post a message in the chat. Or if you're on your phone, please send me an email, or many of you have my cell phone number as well. You should have all received that a little bit earlier. So feel free to text any questions to me. I will, if we don't get to them shortly, we'll get to them in just a little while. So we'll leave it open for a bit, see if any questions come in.
Okay, so the next group is community engagement, and reporting for community engagement is
Reverend Dalton.
Reverend Dalton, yes.
Okay, thank you, Leroy. Thank you, Mayo, and greetings to everyone on this wonderful group, and also greetings to my colleagues in the working group for community engagement. All right, so let me just jump right in. We have had 3 meetings, and we were able to receive information from 2 members who attended a meeting at the police academy. And also from Sergeant Dress from the county police came and spoke to us as well. And we received a couple reports also from the Community Affairs Patrol Division, and also a report regarding PACT, which is a policing program, community policing program in Mount Kisco. So here's our report. So all the key issues we discussed regarding community engagement tie tightly that we discussed tie tightly to the philosophy of policing that is demonstrated in the systems of policing that are utilized in the area of community engagement. So we want to be clear that we're not talking about individuals who might be good cops, bad cops, but we were looking at the whole system and how the areas that need to be addressed for the desired outcome of healthy and positive community engagement. And when we were reviewing the data and in our discussions, we brought with us the lenses that we're offering and that we used from years of experience and expertise in community organizing, community leadership, and also being members of communities ourselves within Westchester. And so this is what we found as key issues and needs. So what we found as a key issue is a lack of training and cultural competency. And I'll just explain what cultural competency is. Cultural competency is the capacity of an individual or even a system to see the cultural commonalities and differences that are around them or us, and then adapt behaviors and communication styles in appropriate ways. So in short, it means how we respond to difference and how we pay attention to the experiences of others as we interact with them. So one of my examples, and I've been thinking about this ever since it happened, I participated on one of the digital public forums where we're receiving public comments, right, to this group. And one of the things that I heard repeatedly over and over from several individuals were from callers who are white individuals who live in Westchester, and their comments pretty much sounded something like this. I've lived in Westchester all my life. I have never had a problem. I have never encountered any issue with the county police. I don't think there needs to be any reason for reform. I don't think there is a need for reform. So what that said to me was, because my experience tells me I have never experienced a problem, then there is no need for a change in this experience overall. In other words, my experience is valid. The experiences of others who experience something totally different is invalid and inauthentic, and therefore I don't see a need to create any kind of change to the situation here. So the problem is, the key problem here is that it's about trying to conform everyone's experience to one experience. Intercultural competency addresses this as well. My experience and the experience of the community members who might interact with me may be different, but we won't ever know it until we're actually attentive to that and paying attention to what those cultural commonalities and differences might be and how those experiences will be experienced differently through the lenses of other people. Okay, so moving on, also another key issue is identifying and creating supportive environments that carry through innovative programming or services. I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but just kind of a teaser about that. How does the system within the county police offer an inviting environment for out-of-the-box thinking, for innovative solutions to common problems that tie together systems and issues that are present in the community, as well as what could be offered through the county police in different ways, right? Towards community engagement issues, that is. Another one that we talked about is reimagining a mental health approach via a community engagement. So we noted that crisis prevention teams and that program is beginning to ramp up. I saw the press release about that the other day. And how can we offer this mental health approach so that community members are aware and they know what to expect? So for an example, we talked about people that we know who have stated, I am never going to call the crisis mobile health team when my Black son is having a mental health breakdown, because I'm afraid my Black son will be killed in that encounter. What they're using is the experiences and the perceptions that they receive across the country and also over social media. It doesn't mean it's necessarily the intention of Westchester County Police or the crisis mobile health teams to kill anybody in a situation. However, what do we do to communicate with the community that the experiences that they will experience may be different, and how do we assure them and create that relationship? Understanding nonverbal engagement and communication, and it's another area of intercultural competency. Incentivize more officers to be involved in and understand the concept of community engagement, and that it's more about participation and less about overseeing a community, less focusing on transactional engagements. And also de-escalation training, inclusive of mental health training and implicit bias and anti-racism training, and also other ways law enforcement can engage with community in order to have positive outcomes, such as being bilingual, being bicultural, having cultural competency. So some initial recommendations that we talked about, of course, is the forward-facing things that are easy to address, like press releases and public relations. In context of restraints, use of force, one of the things we talked about is recent press releases that were given regarding chokeholds, because the New York City has banned chokeholds, and there were several press releases that were released around that same time, saying that these certain departments and also agencies, this is how they were going to address the chokehold situation, right? And that ban, and who could go into what area. Now, there could have been different ways to word that in a way that also would have been more positive for the community members to discuss. So that's just one example. How can we brand or change the messaging of our policing work in a different way so that it's positively received, or it's received in a way that the community has more communication about it and also dialogue. Mental health related cases, so about the CRT teams, recommending using them to their fullest potential, recommending that other municipalities share this service and share costs associated with the service. I already said a little bit about education and communication, and also recommendation at every county level. And then finally, training implicit bias and cultural competency. For this training of implicit bias to become more standardized and consistent, in other words, annual, among all police departments, recruits, and also those who are in service. We talked about possibly making it part of state legislation and recommendation to DCJS. I also would like to add that cultural competency become compulsory for all candidates and also current officers. And some opportunities that we see within this issue area. So I just want to talk a little bit about the PAC program in Mount Kisco. We had the wonderful opportunity to hear from Sergeant Dress about the PAC program in Mount Kisco. And while he was talking, we received a lot of information about how the PAC program has been able to bring community leaders and community members into a deeper relationship with police officers through the PAC program, and also connecting Neighbors Link with the Mount Kisco Police, or with the County Police in Mount Kisco. And programs like these we thought were wonderful. We liked hearing about it, and in fact, we heard more from Corinne Patino, who is a member of our working group, and she was an on-the-ground thinking partner, strategic thinking partner, when this program began to come into formation through the shepherding of Officer Ramirez, who's a school resource officer in that area. We believe programs like this should be the norm and not unique. We noticed that this program was developed by Officer Ramirez, and he developed it because it was an ideal that he had been holding for a while, but he did not find a successful place to implement it until he was able to. It seemed like a confluence of the right officer with the right leadership skills and the right idea and the right community member engagement, and also the right environment in terms of supervision, allowing him the space and permission to roll this program out. Now, all of those things are a wonderful confluence, and we applaud Officer Ramirez. We applaud all of those who allowed him to have that, to create that environment and space for him to roll that program out, right? However, we want to say that programs like this should not be unique. It should be part of the norm. It should be part of the culture, right? So when we're thinking about these kinds of structures and systems, what do we need to do, or what do we need to see in order to make sure that leaders within the county police are looking for gifts and talents and capabilities of other officers who can be forward-facing in terms of their community engagement leadership skills? How do we recruit for them? How do we identify those talents? How do we say that every single person who is in county police also has these talents and gifts and nurtures them to come into to come fully forward, right? And how do we also create the space and supervision in our supervisory places and also systems that would allow these innovative ideas to come out? So we're talking about the change of culture so that they become more the norm and not a unique program. And we loved it. We loved hearing about it, and we want to hear more of it. We also noted that this opportunity was something that that used to be much stronger than it is now. So there has been some shift that has happened over time. So it used to be stronger, and it's not quite as strong now. So I already talked about identifying leadership skills of officers. There's an opportunity to reimagine the role of school resource officers with better understanding of their roles. An opportunity to create mentoring programs between SROs and school-aged children. And police can do outreach with other groups that do not necessarily interact with such as houses of worship, nonprofit organizations, community health clinics, mental health organizations, etc., to strengthen coalitions or partnerships so other opportunities like this could come to fruition. Okay, so I'm going to keep going because I know I'm just about out of time. Cultures and some of the challenges we observed are culture and perceptions, how communities see police officers and policing. And there's a particular concern that we raised over and over again about how Black and brown youth and young adults see police officers and policing. Because of the environment that we're in, there is a level of fear, caution, suspicion, and mistrust that is high. How do we engage in a different way? There is an increased amount of resentment among from police officers towards the community they work in. We think that is also related to low morale and also creates low morale. So how do we create different environments for those conversations and dialogues to happen and decrease the level of fear? There needs to be a lot of communication on both sides. It's currently lacking. We think we need to work on facilitating positive dialogues and spaces for courageous conversations. Expectation of what the police sees as working and what the community sees as working don't always agree, right? They're not always matched. So how do we pay attention to each other so we can hear more of what the community believes is working and could work, and vice versa, right? Okay. So what do we think is currently working? We do see evidence of individual officers who have innovative ideas, like I talked about Officer Ramirez, right? And we want to see those ideas and examples come more and more integrated into the system so it becomes a norm. We do see that there are some police departments, like the county police, who have a community affairs division. We looked at Greenberg. We talked a little bit about Mount Vernon, how they just hired a person to head a department just like this that doesn't have any kind of policing background. We applaud those efforts, and we want to see how that becomes integrated into the wider system. And so the last comment that I will make is simply this statement: the diagnosis determines the treatment. The diagnosis determines the treatment. If the narrative that we tell ourselves is that we are meeting or exceeding the guidelines and standards that's set before us from the state, without diving down to determine the premise, the philosophy, and the outcomes that's experienced in our communities, we can and always will tell ourselves that the diagnosis that we have is accurate, and the treatment that we're using is accurate, without looking closely to see if the diagnosis that we're using is based on a standard that does not reach down deep enough for our communities and for the level of engagement that we're looking for. So what we're asking with the working group on community engagement is asking and believes is that further evaluation and analysis about community engagement as a whole, as a system, as part of the integrated whole of community of policing overall, that there needs to be a change in the narrative that we tell ourselves so that the diagnosis can be different, and therefore the treatment and the outcomes that's experienced in our communities can be different as well. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you very much, Reverend Dalton. We really appreciate you representing your working group. We know that you've participated and worked hard in getting to where we are now. It does not go without our utmost appreciation. Are there questions that came through the chat? We have one question.
We have one question from County Legislator Colin Smith. Reverend, what role do you think recruitment plays in creating better cultural competency within the police department?
Thank you, Legislator Smith. I think that's a wonderful question. I love the question, and it gets right to the point that the Community Engagement Working Group has been talking about. Recruitment plays a very pivotal role in creating better community cultural competency. And I'm just going to say this. Okay, so representation does matter, right? But the goal that we're working for is not to diversity itself. Diversity itself is not the goal. Intercultural competency is about how do we, and not just intercultural competency, but the goal that we should have is what is inclusion. Inclusion is when people feel valued and engaged for their expertise, their experience, their authority, their voice, their presence, their body, everything that they bring, their gifts, their talent to the work and to the job, right? So if we're only hiring or recruiting or looking for or promoting people simply based on the diversity models or the categories of, okay, checklist, I have one from this category, one from this category, one from this category, and I'm done without thinking about how do I show that I value and engage you as well. Value and engagement. And that is not just for those persons who are officers, who are part of our in-service personnel, but also who are in our communities. How do community members feel valued and engaged by the police? I'll leave that for you to think about.
That certainly provides us with something to think about. Any other questions, Carter?
No other questions at this time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have training and equipment. And the reporter, as I understand it, is Reverend Dr. Vernon Williams.
Dr. Williams, are you here?
He said he said he's on.
Oh,
I
okay.
texted him.
Maybe what we can do is let's go to the next group and then we'll get rid of one to come back up.
Reverend, are you muted? I'm assuming he's joined by phone, so I have all the phones. Oh. Hello? Oh, I guess he's not here.
He's okay. He says he is.
Can you ask if it's by phone?
Should I ask if he's muted?
Yeah.
He's coming.
It sounds like he's,
Yeah.
maybe he's trying to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
He's muted.
Okay. So
Can you unmute him or?
he's unmuted on our end. If he's muted, it's on his phone.
Okay, they're
now,
gonna
so.
try
He's
to,
unmuted on
Try.
mine.
He has to unmute
I
himself.
think it may be on your end. It says the host is muted and.
Yeah, he's unmuted. How is he joined? Is he calling in?
Oh, he's on the phone.
Yeah, he's unmuted. I've unmuted everybody who's called in. They're all unmuted. I'll do it again.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, they're all open.
Okay, why don't we work on this technical?
You know what we'll do is we'll go to the next group, try to resolve this. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Email him or text him and ask him to go out and come back in.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, we'll go to qualifications and recruitment with Lawrence Otis Graham as the reporter.
Thank you. This is Lawrence Otis Graham. Can you hear me? Am I unmuted?
You are. We can hear you, sir.
Terrific. Thank you. I want to thank the co-chairs of this committee, and I want to thank the county executive and all of you who have participated in the different working groups. And I was chosen to represent the working group that's discussing qualifications and recruitment. And I should also mention that in addition to meeting with the Deputy Commissioner of Public Safety and with the Commissioner of Human Resources, we were also informed by one of the public meetings that I had participated in, and also as background, I have served for several years as chairman of the Westchester County Police Board, which we have a very narrow focus on what the board opines on, but at least to some extent, I was aware of a lot of what the county police does, just simply because of having been involved with them for so many years. I was able to also gather certain information that could inform our working group. But to start off with, I wanted to mention that in our discussions, we found that one of the major concerns, and I think several of the other working groups have mentioned this, the impact of how we talk about diversity and what does it mean to be diverse, because too often the concept has been, the thought has been, well, as long as we have X number of women or X number of African Americans, X number of Latinos, and X number of whites, we have diversity. And as a couple of the other reporters had mentioned, it's really also diversity of experience, and a certain type of experience might not necessarily, just simply because someone is of a particular ethnic group or racial group or gender, that they're going to have an open mind or have an experience that has allowed them to understand the experience of those individuals. So I wanted to comment on the working group that in our working group, we started off by looking at the recruitment process. And we also, so I'll be moving back between the recruitment process as well as what are used as current qualifications and what we feel the qualifications should be. So when we were looking at the recruitment process, we were looking at how do we have an outcome-driven recruitment process that allows people to, not just the county police, because we were also focusing as well, thinking about how would this be used in the municipal police forces, since we have many. And recognizing obviously the county police does not have control over those, but we did want to notice that some of the concerns that many people who have been stopped in the county, I think 20 years ago it was, that the county implemented a reporting process which we feel should be not only implemented, but also encouraged, but in some way, if we could, I don't know what kind of way in which the state or another agency can insist that the separate municipalities create their own types of reporting, so that just as the county, which reports on it twice a year, whenever stopping someone, they not only keep track of what their gender and racial and ethnic group is, but they're also keeping track of what the numbers that are being stopped of these different individuals, but also which ones are actually receiving tickets, which ones are actually also being arrested. And we feel that that would be another way of addressing the whole issue of making these different agencies accountable. But the first thing we looked at was looking at what the qualification should be of a good police officer. We said they must be someone who exercises sound judgment with their knowledge of the law, and with their knowledge of the law to protect human rights, not just to punish, but also to protect their human rights and to preserve life. A police officer who could think on his or her feet. And as we looked at some of these the qualifications that we felt, we asked ourselves, well, what is being used right now to determine who gets hired and who gets considered? And most cases, the most important concern is what the score is on the civil service exam, and it's the police exam that's given generally like once every 6 months or once a year. And I know that it's been postponed because of COVID, but our concern was, is this test necessarily capturing all of what it takes to determine who is going to be a good police officer? Who is going to be, is it someone who necessarily has good communication skills? Because that also is a part of what we feel are good qualifications, because many times it's not just being able to catch someone or to be able to particularly if we're talking about traffic stops, or if we're being able to identify what's taking place, what an individual is doing before they're arrested, but also are we able to communicate to people? Because there was one concern that people were raising, and I think at least one other reporter mentioned it, and that was one of the members of our committee had mentioned that they were aware of at least two friends who had called the police, not the county police, but had called their own local municipalities to aid them with one of their children who was having an emotional breakdown, and it was not anything criminal. But the problem was that when the police officer arrived, these two individuals felt that it was racial, that that the police immediately drew their guns, and this was dealing with a child, and the presumption was, no one got hurt in these two incidents, but the concern was that immediately, because the police were not able to communicate or address the issue of mental health issues, that the natural response was to draw their arms. So that was one thing that we felt, is that they have to have communication skills and an ability to address mental health issues. The other issue that we felt certainly is important in determining qualifications is to make sure that these individuals have high moral and ethical standards, and not ones that were just simply based upon what people's general judgment was in an interview, but also making sure that there was any information that we knew about them was not going to be hidden by this, I guess, this term, this blue line that within people, the way in which people talk about the police, that they will defend and hide and protect any negative information that's been found about another officer. And once again, this is not specific to the county police, and no findings that we've come across about that, but simply that our concern was that we would be able to, when determining the qualifications of a particular officer, that we also look at any other information, not just relying on what on just what is apparent in an interview. The other issue is we said that we've looked at continuing police education, and we looked at what should the qualifications be? Is it enough to have a high school degree? Should we require a 2-year associate's degree? Should we require a 4-year degree? There were some members of our committee that thought, well, with more education comes more sophistication, more experience, more exposure to different types of people, and maybe that also leads to an open-mindedness to not just rely on stereotypes. Now, as far as specific recruitment issues, we look at some of the challenges that what happens with some of today's recruitment, and that is there's a clear perception in communities of color of systemic racism in which persons of color are treated differently by the police than similar situated white residents. But there's also a perception by some police officers that some persons in communities of color are non-cooperative and that they carry a predisposed dislike for law enforcement. So that issue has to be addressed. With regard to the county police, they informed us that they use a variety of ways in which to recruit, and it includes everything from speaking to organizations that focus on, like the Guardians, which is the Black law enforcement organization, or the Latino law enforcement organization, because realize that also, and when I say Latino, I'm not talking about just Spanish speaking. I'm also talking about Latinos who are only English speaking, and there are two lists that people often look at, and there is a general county list that lists people based upon their scores, and then there is a Spanish-speaking list, and then there is a individual municipality list. So, for example, Mount Vernon has its own list, and similarly, New Rochelle has its own list. Newcastle has its own list. Each of the individual municipalities has their own list. But one of the challenges is that we found that, and very limiting, is that oftentimes some communities, if they're reluctant to even go to their own list, because the minute they go to their own list, I guess it's a requirement, at least in our state, that once you move to start recruiting from your list, you have to remain on that list. You can't move back to the county list unless you have waited out the next, I think it's 2 or 3 years. There's a period, I think a three-year period under which one has to remain selecting individuals from a community list. So it's impossible sometimes to manage the diversity, because if you're looking at a community that is a small town or village, it doesn't have great diversity. The minute they have moved to their own list to pick an individual that they want that's at the top of that list, they can't move back to the county list, which often has obviously greater diversity. And the other issue that we feel that was important with regard to recruitment is right now, there doesn't seem to be very good transparency on diversity. So when we ask about, is there a list that similar to like when individuals are moving to a particular town in Westchester, if they go to a board of education, they can say, can I have a list of the makeup of all of the students and teachers that are in this district? They can give you by school and tell you exactly how many, for example, the students, how many African-American students there are in the 3rd grade, how many white students there are in the 5th grade, or how many Asian students, and so forth. And we ask the question, well, is there equal transparency in the makeup of the different racial breakdowns in the police departments? And the county says that they are aware of what the breakdowns are within their own, but they do not have records on the different entities, and they said they didn't see that there was any public, they didn't believe there was any public way in which those are available to people, to even the different police chiefs, and they weren't sure that it would even be available to them. And we asked if their breakdown of their hiring and their makeup of their police force was available to the public, and they said that at this point it is not, but they don't know that it wouldn't. The deputy commissioner said that it would probably be available if an individual from the public asked, but he wasn't certain about that. But I think that's something that we should insist on, that it should be made available, because we don't see any reason why it should be private information. Because when looking at the private sector, for example, if you want to know the breakdown of a particular law firm or accounting firm, that information is made public. So we feel the same thing should be done, certainly in our police departments. The other thing that we talked about was the importance of, with regard to recruitment, is making sure that different police departments reach out to the various houses of worship, because in many cases, particularly in the African American community, there is often a network that exists. In the same way that there is an old boys network that exists, that many officers who have come from white, historically going back several years, Irish or Italian families who have had relatives in the departments who can give advice and give suggestions to their relatives and to friends that are within their own community, and tell them this is a great way of finding out about a position, and this is the type of practice you should put in place if you're preparing for a police test or a police exam. We're going to be able to tell them their police exam is coming up. So we suggest that the county, as well as different municipalities, reach out to organizations like the Urban League of Westchester or the various NAACP chapters, local chapters, as well as the different houses of worship, African American churches, and other organizations and groups that particularly inform that community. And the county should establish a type of diversity scorecard system that ranks county and municipalities based on benchmarks and goals that track the progress for them to have actually reached out to these organizations. Another issue, and I think probably the biggest issue, is a change in the civil service rules. And we realize that the county does not have the authority to do this, but it's something that the state should reach out to the state to insist upon, because right now the limitations that are created by the civil service laws that prevent municipalities from hiring from different lists of candidates are quite stringent, quite severe. And there's this, like, as I mentioned before, they actually call it the rule of three, which restricts these departments from interviewing and hiring from a larger pool of candidates, and that often is to the disadvantage of people from who are Black and brown people. So I want to sort of stop there. If there's other questions, I don't know if I've gone on too long, but those are some of the biggest concerns. I think, as I said, are the limitations that are created by the civil service, which again, that's driven by New York State civil service law. But I think that's something that we have to investigate. But also the importance of making sure that we have more transparency with regard to what is the makeup of the different police departments, as well as the county police, and as far as gender, race, and ethnicity.
It is clear that your working group has been working diligently and looking at the issues and examining them, and so that we know and we'll be able to take a deeper dive on some of the issues. Once again, thank you. And
thank you.
There is one question I understand, and Copper, who was that question?
This question's from Damon Jones. Damon, I'm going to unmute you right now.
Yes. Hello, everybody. I heard you talk about increasing education for the quality of candidates to become police officers. I would like to know, in moving forward, in increasing the education, does that lessen the pool of Black and brown to become candidates in law enforcement?
Excellent question. We were recommending it as something to consider, because we have not measured the effect, because the last thing we want to do is to further limit the number of African American, Black and brown individuals who would be candidates. One thing that we certainly did recognize is that when looking at the experiences of certain individuals who are currently in that make up not just the county but the other municipal police forces, is that they're often taken, at least the local small municipalities often are hiring from their own community of people that they know, that are already familiar, that they're already familiar with them, and that they knew from high school. And the concern was that if you are limiting your focus to individuals who you already know and you're hiring from your own local list, and they're individuals who have a narrow experience of who they've been exposed to, the concern was, one thing is that they're often stereotyped that are formed in communities where individuals have only encountered their own kind, their own people that don't come from their own background. And when we looked at that, at the fact that you have to look at two things. It's not just the makeup of a community, but it's also the makeup of the individuals who work in that community, who pass through that community, who patronize the businesses and stores in that community. So a community that might be population-wise, residentially, 95% white, and 2% and 98% solely English-speaking, might be also a community that has stores and restaurants and businesses where the population that's actually during the day is maybe 30% black and brown and 20% Spanish-speaking. And so the concern was that if they were only hiring officers who had only a high school degree, they were coming from that basically white town growing up there, that their lack of exposure through education and through experience might cause them not to understand different types of people. But you're raising an excellent point. We don't yet know if the requirement of saying you have to have 2 years of college or you're like an associate's degree or something beyond that would have a negative effect on the availability or the numbers of potential candidates that are black or brown. But that's something we would definitely have to explore.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. Crystal, did you have a comment that you wanted to share?
Right, Damon? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, hi, Damon. Just to add to, in addition to what Lawrence was saying, we're definitely looking at that, and that was the first thing that I had discussed, because we know in the city of Mount Vernon, that's the only place where you have the high school diploma. Everybody else in the municipalities ask for a 2-year commitment for a college education.
I think Sean Harris changed that when he was committed. You have to check. You have to check with the city council. Sean Harris was commissioner. I think he changed it to a 2-year degree because we had an argument about it. So I think you.
Really?
Yes, I think you need that. And the reason why I brought that up, because the correlation between the percentage of black and brown in corrections that you only need a high school diploma or a GED to how in reflections to the police department. And we have 720 officers. So you could put in maybe 10 police departments within our department and you see the difference in representation.
Right, absolutely, and I'm saying that to agree with you, and we had, like we said, from the inception of this group, that was my first remark regarding that, because it will divide us. But we are looking at it from a perspective, maybe they can have the high school diploma and work towards their degree while being on probation or probation officer, and offering the free opportunity at WCC or the low-cost source, something like that in comparison. So we're definitely not disregarding that aspect, because we know we'll lose our black and brown individuals.
And if I may just very briefly, one of the things that had been discussed also was in combination perhaps with community engagement, was finding a way that the Department of Public Safety can more interact with students, and looking at perhaps pilot programs where you may be able to have a class that involved the police going in and discussing, where that class was geared specifically toward careers in law enforcement. So to the degree that we can do that, we would possibly be able to get the benefit of two things in one: building that relationship with the students and the police, and also talking to the students about what next steps would be necessary to engage the various ways you can have a career in law enforcement.
So we have one other question and one other clarification. Commissioner Gleason wants to note that currently the county exam only requires a high school diploma. So that exam is designed for that level, presumably. Our other question is from Michael Hagan, so I'm going to unmute him in order for him to ask his question.
Yeah, the question would be, I would say maybe it was about 10 years ago, somewhere in that vicinity. They changed the qualification to take the test from having to be a county resident before you become the police officer to having to be a county resident to take the test, which basically excluded all of New York City, which you can't have a bigger pool, you know? And so I think that was definitely something that made it more difficult to recruit minority candidates. So
Thank you, Mike, great point.
The question is there any comparison to prior to when they changed that law as to now, you know, the number of people who the minority pool, you know, within the list?
Well, to your point, we had Deputy Commissioner Frank, I can't pronounce his last name, from the Human Resources Department, who works for the civil service. And he explained why they went that route, because they would have over, you know, 2,000, 3,000 candidates that would apply, and you have to use the residents first, so you're never getting to those people. So you're just taking their money, collecting the application, going through that whole process, and having to spend the extra money to provide, you know, the security and employees to monitor the test, only for them never to be used. So that is the reason why they argued that rule, or to change that for the Westchester County Department. So instead of getting 2,000 or 3,000, they get about 1,000 candidates that are Westchester County bound.
I think they're both great points. And again, today this is not our final report. This is an opportunity for us to share from the different working groups so we can see where the overlap may be. And it may help each different group even explore beyond where they are right now. But this sounds like something that we can continue to explore.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions on,
No other questions at this time.
I think we have corrected on our end the technical issues as related to the training and equipment reporter. And so, Reverend Williams, are you there now?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much to our co-chairpersons, Fraser and Bartlett. I'm reporting on behalf of the Training and Equipment Working Group. We followed the template as closely as possible. We had 3 meetings, July 27th, August 17th, and September 1st. We had to, in help assisting us preparing for our presentation, we received a document entitled the Police Academy Training Highlights, and it included a recruit training summary. And we made a visit to the training academy in Valhalla and was presented to by Lieutenant Nick Anlongi, who is the training academy director. We've had robust discussion in our group, and what I'm presenting today is a consensus of the key issues and recommendations of the group. These are bullet points. I have a number of bullet points. I'm going to begin with the key issues. There is not enough emphasis on tactical perception, and that's a term that's fairly new, formerly known as implicit bias. There is a lack of state-mandated in-service annual training after the initial recruit training and training for unaccredited police departments. There's a lack of training. Supervisory training is not mandated by NYS DCJS beyond the initial course and police supervision. The WCPD does 4 days of supervisory in-training service annually. The DCJS mandates that police recruits get 20 hours of crisis intervention training by the mental health professionals in the county PD. The county PD does 37.5 hours of training, plus additional overlapping and training in other areas like de-escalation and persons with disability. But as this is a significant issue, we need to identify ways that mental health professionals can work together with the police to ensure the best outcome. Another issue is promotion and hiring are based primarily on testing. The license versus certification, that was an issue that was brought up by another working group. Another issue we have is DCJS and WCPD mandate 5 hours of training on cultural diversity and bias crimes. However, new hate groups and symbols of hate change and emerge regularly, so one-time training in this area is insufficient. Another issue, DCJS mandates 40 hours of firearms training for new recruits. NYS DCJS only mandates annual firearm training for accredited agencies. All new recruits that come through the county academy receive approximately 60 hours of firearm training, and WCPD are required to do 7.5 hours of firearms training annually. Another issue, a key issue, is probation for recruits is 18 months. 5 months of that is in the academy, 2 months with the training officer. And an issue is that that is not enough time actually to do the job while on probation. Many police departments in both the state and county have or do not have body cameras. The DCS cut training hours in the area of community policing last year by 50%. So those were the key issues that our group came up. And then we have recommendations. Recommendations for the NYS DCJS are as follows. Law enforcement accreditation should be required for every law enforcement agency in the state. Training requirements standards should be amended by DCJS to include mandatory leadership training for second and third line supervisors annually. WCPD should implement the same training. DCJS mandates 3 days of in-service only for accredited agencies, and that mandate includes very few specific requirements. Training requirement standards for annual in-service training should be amended to include mandatory training on procedural justice, professional communications, de-escalation, and tactical perception, formerly known as implicit bias. State funding should be made available for law enforcement agencies to begin to expand body-worn camera programs. Extended probationary period by 6 months so officers can be properly evaluated post-academy training. Create a threshold for substantiated complaints, after which an officer is mandated for targeted remedial training in the problem area. Those are the recommendations for New York State DCJS. These are the recommendations for the County Police Department. That the county issue all officers department smartphones to enhance communications, information sharing, and training capabilities. To expand unified in-service training to include community policing, ethics, and tactical perception, formerly known as implicit bias. That mandatory annual leadership training for second and third line supervisors need to be implemented and should include tactical perception, which is formerly known as implicit bias. Currently, the only state requirement for supervisors is the course in police supervision required for all first line supervisors to attend within 1 year of promotion. To develop a training library of a wide variety of training topics, the Academy will store this library on a training platform and use it for in-service training. To develop a formalized training orientation for transfer officers. Currently, the training for transfers at the Academy consists solely of firearms, tasers, OC, and use of force. The recommended expanded training should include procedural justice, professional communications, and tactical perception, formerly known as implicit bias. The cadre of speakers during recruit cultural diversity training should be expanded to include additional minority populations. The Westchester County Police Academy Basic Recruit School already goes above and what is required of DCJS curriculum. However, the addition of further training in the recommended areas require extending the length of basic recruit school. And then finally, concurrently with tactical training, the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, A Powerful Lesson in Personal Change by Stephen R. Covey would be an excellent asset if it were woven into the police training academy culture. It would help uncover and address implicit bias and plant seeds for lifelong personal development. We have one recommendation for local law enforcement agencies to utilize the county's in-service training. And the challenges that we found were funding for the changes that are being recommended and acknowledging implicit bias so it can be specifically addressed. This is our report.
Are there any questions, Copper?
At this time, there are no questions.
Pastor, thank you very much for your time and effort and for your working group. A tremendous amount of time went into this, and we appreciate all of the effort.
Okay, since there are no other questions at this time, we'll move to our final working group report, which is policies and procedures, and the reporter, Damon Jones.
Once again, hello, everybody, and I want to thank the chair and the co-chair, the policies and procedures group. We actually had 5 meetings, and I think all the meetings were very good. We had one guest speaker as of now, Captain Bowler from the Westchester County Corrections Training Department, to discuss in-service training and how the in-service training correlates with state standards and national standards. The key issues, identifying the key issues, we must remove the profit motive from policing. We must develop a police licensing system. We must condition license and promotions on community service, similar to how lawyers or other licensed professionals are required to volunteer time with their communities. This will help build a stronger bond between officers and the community. Ensure community service standards are appropriately tailored to different ranks. Develop enhanced continuing education for officers, include training on how to engage with those struggling with mental illness. Continuing education must also provide opportunities for the mental health of officers to be gauged. It must also allow officers struggling with job-related mental health issues to receive opportunities to recover or otherwise negotiate that stress. It is important that we provide in a private fashion to accommodate existing culture, and also enhance education regarding prejudice. Ensure public and officers have access to digital copies of departmental manual and policies. Ensure that the department policies are easy to digest and cover necessary issues, including use of force, de-escalation training, and duty to intervene, etc. Initial recommendations. Our initial recommendations is to develop concrete license accreditation system, include mandatory continuing law enforcement education, include enhanced in-service training requirements, include a requirement for community service similar to lawyers, licensed and professionals to maintain the accreditation and promotion, increase these requirements for higher ranks in an appropriate fashion. All police departments in New York State should be state and national accreditation. Parallel corrections and public safety policies and procedures for productive interaction. Develop continued in-service law enforcement education. Also develop in-service community service requirements. Modernize the police handbook and use of force policy, add a de-escalation policy. This policy should encourage officers to avoid unnecessary and inappropriate use of force or arrest. Include provisions encouraging officers to develop awareness of surrounding municipality policies. Ensure mandatory reporting and duty to intervene policies are present and modernized. The handbook should also be digitized and must be accessible to officers and members of the public. Re-examining the crisis intervention team. And what are some of the opportunities that you see within this issue area? Explore opportunities to reform and contract renegotiations, parallel the work with corrections and public safety to find helpful new strategies. Many policies and corrections could be beneficial to public safety department. We also discuss coordinated training between corrections and public safety in a fashion that which may help officers learn the kind of verbal judo and de-escalation skills which our corrections department employs. We see an opportunity to put real priority in de-escalation. This could be accomplished by working it throughout our policies and procedures. We see an opportunity to remove financial incentives from policing. We also see an opportunity to use the governor's executive order to highlight policies which would benefit Westchester if universally adopted. We see an opportunity to improve community engagement through training. What are some of the challenges observed? Getting officers to perform in a different way will require an internal culture change. Negotiations with existing entities. The county current fiscal challenges restrict our availabilities to mean to reform. Countywide reform is also impossible with the many different municipalities and police departments. No entity seems to be universally reviewing police throughout Westchester or New York State. This makes it difficult to identify trends and make decisions. Ideally, this task force will be able to cooperate with some state entities to ensure broader application to our report. This does not seem to be a part of the governor's mandate. Without a statewide conversation, coordination on training due to training zones may become a complicated factor. What is currently working? The Police and Community Together program would be helpful if this was expanded. Westchester County currently has a proactive police academy and has gone beyond the state's accreditation standards, putting the PD ahead of many others. Westchester also previously had a crisis intervention team, which should be revisited. The recent introduction of body-worn cameras is a positive change. Any questions?
So we have one initial question from Mike Hagan, so I'm going to unmute him right now.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, you're unmuted.
Hi, thanks. Just one question is, did the committee get a chance to look at the current policies and procedures?
Yes.
Okay. Because some of what we're talking about, or what I heard on policies and procedures, I think it's in there. I can tell you right here is a computer, the entire manual, the department manual is digitized. I can even search by just a keyword. I can access that through my phone, get into the system. So
is it online to the public?
Well, I thought you said for the.
No, we also said make it public.
No, I understand that, and we dealt with that in transparency.
Mm-hmm.
But here I thought I heard making sure that the officers have access to it.
Well, that's part of the thing too. The officers in the public, make sure.
Right. I mean, I just thought I heard that. Make sure that it's digitized and available for the officers to see, easy to read. Again, it's there. You can access it through any department computer. If you can get into the county system, you can access it through one of your devices. It's constantly updated. We get updates on a regular basis. Then we have to actually, we'll get an email. and we'll have to actually indicate that we saw the update.
So Mike, what I would suggest, what I would suggest is this might be something for the two working groups to consider down the road, but I think everybody's on the same page as for the need, and we can
Wanted to know
explore
if
to
you
what
guys
degree it's
were-
accessible.
I just want to know
I'm
if
sorry?
that working group was advised of all this.
No, well, one of the reasons.
Yes, absolutely, and again, this is a work in progress, it's not a final report, so perhaps we can have a joint session where we can look at that further, but I think everybody seems to at least be in agreement that there's a benefit of having that recommendation.
No problem.
I just like to say so. I think one of the reasons we were talking about that because when issues arise in some cases, you know, not specific to county police, but some cases officers do not know their policies and procedures or their training. So I think to make sure that not just county police, but make sure that the municipalities in Westchester County and sure these officers have the proper policies, the proper handbook, and the proper training. Because when things arise and they're on that witness stand, sometimes they don't recall the proper policies or procedures. So I think that's what one of the reasons we put that in there. But we also added the public too.
Thank you. Was there another question?
There was
I
a
think there may be
question.
another one for Dave.
So there's one other question that I'm seeing right here. I did get several. One other question here is from legislator Colin Smith. It's, can you describe the profit motive angle of law enforcement? What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, there is a there is a profit mode in many municipalities to generate. We have a whole case in New York City on quotas, and quotas generate money for the city, and also the culture of collar for dollars, right? To make arrests, and what that does is that incentivizes and it increases what we call racial profiling. So if we take if we take the profit angle out of policing, that will have an enormous effect on these different issues, especially racial profile.
What was the other question?
So the other question is from Miss Barbara Hart. So I'm going to unmute her in order for her to ask her question. Barbara, if you could just bear with me. Barbara, you should be unmuted now.
Yes, I think so.
Uh-huh.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I just want to make one observation in regard to the concept of service and the idea of being involved in the community over and above one's work day, which is at least how I heard the suggestion. And as an attorney, one of the things that happened is that very established attorneys start to make pro bono requirements for junior attorneys. And as an attorney and a mother, and now I'm an old attorney, I realize how difficult it's been to be an attorney and a mother and do even more. And so you could inadvertently, just like the earlier discussion regarding inadvertently, the college degree might filter out more candidates of colors as applicants. You could also be imposing an additional qualification that would make it difficult for all parents, but sometimes most profoundly moms who are working, who then already feel like guilty working moms, and then they have to go do more. And so I would think that I think that's a lovely idea, and maybe that is even like reimagining policing would be police being involved in public service, the bake sale or the whatever, the Boy Scouts and different things as part of their day-to-day work, but more after work obligations could be very. So that was my thought.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your question. I don't think we were talking about, I mean, it takes 4 to 5 years for an officer to be eligible take the supervisor's exam. So if an officer wants to be a sergeant, 4 to 5 years, we're talking 40 hours. You know, if you can't do 40 hours in 4 years, that's not a commitment to your community and commitment to the community that you sworn to protect and serve. And also it helps the supervisors to know their community. If you're going to be a supervisor over a squad or over a group of officers, you should know your community. So I understand what you're saying, but I also don't think that 40 hours in 4 years will be a detriment for an officer, and it shows their commitment to the community. One of the biggest problems is that these officers don't know the community. A lot of them don't come from the community, especially when we're dealing with Black and brown communities. So, and the fact of the matter is, other than Mount Vernon, some police departments don't have no more than 20 Black cops. So you look at Yonkers with the number of about 600 officers, and they maybe have 15 Black cops out of 600. So I really think that a community component should be in it, for the police to know the community and the community to know their police officers.
I think it's compensated time. I don't think it's over and above. It concerns me. I think it might be even part of redefining, but it just concerns me. I don't think 40 hours is a lot, but it's we want people to have families and have robust family lives too.
No, I really agree. But some cops are making almost $300,000. So if they could, if they could work those hours to make overtime, they could give a day. They could give a day to learn their community that they're making a lot of money off of.
Well,
I think that this is, Barbara, if you don't mind at this stage, I think it's a great question you asked, and I think that there's a lot of nuance and it's something to look at. And again, we're not at the final report yet. So I think it's an opportunity again for us to revisit this and to look at what it might actually look like and how we can do it. And perhaps, different ways to accommodate somebody who particularly has a unique situation. And maybe there is a way to rotate some of this into the actual existing tours. And maybe that should be something to consider. But at this stage, I'm going to suggest that we move forward with respect to that component of it. I think the question was a tremendously valuable question, and we'll certainly look at it further. Yes, Copper, are there any other questions for Damon at this point?
No other questions for Damon at this time.
Okay.
I have one person who'd like to make a statement.
And I just want to, before we get to the statement, I would like to thank Damon, and I'd like to thank your working group. And again, as with all the other working groups, I know you've put a tremendous amount of work in. And again, this is pro bono because you're not getting paid to do this.
I work for the county, and I'm not getting over.
Five meetings already, and the people in your group like to share and exchange ideas. So, but I want to thank you all for that effort and for all the working groups. And before we move on, there are a couple of other questions. I believe there were 2 other questions for our transparency group.
Yes. So our first question comes from legislator Colin Smith. He wanted to ask, do all officers have body cameras right now? And let me first unmute our folks associated with transparency. You should be able to speak now, gentlemen.
From what I know, all members of the patrol division have body cameras, all police officers.
So, Mike, if you're not a police officer, and let's say if you are a detective, do you know whether all detectives or anybody who's not, quote unquote, classified as a police officer would have it?
No, I mean,
no.
There may be some detectives that have it, but detectives are not into body cameras.
There are all police officers have body cameras, and then there are cache of body cameras that are available for different teams when they need to use them, for detectives, for SWAT, for everybody that needs to do entries. So they are available to everybody who needs them at whatever time they need them. with the county police.
Thank you.
Well, Mike,
Our second question.
oh, go ahead with the second question. Maybe this is the second question. Go ahead.
Well, second question is from Tom Munzio. He wants to know, has there been any discussion in regards to the recording of undercover operations?
We have plainclothes officers who wear body cam. As far as undercover operations, I don't know that I can discuss that. I think maybe that's a question for the commissioner if he's on.
Okay. Well, thank you. And again, we can revisit the body cameras at the next working group meeting when it comes down to non-police officers, whether we should have a policy that extends to all detectives, anybody else that's working outside of the office. That's something that we can continue to discuss.
Well, it's an issue of cost. It's an issue of they were able to get as many as they were able to get, which furnished all of the police officers. And if there is more money to get more body cameras, they will be happy to have them.
We'll look at it in terms of our policy recommendations going forward, and that'll be some additional work for the working group. But Mike, thank you very much for the question and for the answer.
We have one additional note from Commissioner Gleason here. He says all patrol officers and sergeants have body cameras. And then we have one person who'd like to make a statement when you gentlemen are ready.
Thank you.
Okay, Legislator Clements, I'm going to unmute you so you can give your statement now.
Okay. Yes, I want to remind everybody that we would like to be reimagining the police. This would include officers that have other credentials like crisis intervention specialists, mental health professionals, social workers. I think this could avoid some of the negative policing images in the communities of color. So when people respond to a crisis, it's not always someone there with a gun. Michael Hagan may remember the name of the officer. I don't. He's a crisis intervention specialist in a certain area. I think it has to do with school shootings, but that officer is working on his PhD. So this is something where as an officer is working, they can go into other professional areas and they can further their education. And I think we should look into that also as a committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And with that, that's all the requests which I've received so far.
Okay. Once again, the reports were tremendous. It shows the effort and hard work that's going into by the task force, and we appreciate it and look forward to working together as we move along. We have a few announcements and next steps to talk about at this point. Certainly as it relates to public forums, I'm asked Blanca to give us a report on where we were and where we are and where we're going.
Sure. So first of all, thank you to all of our task force members and to the presenters for this afternoon's sharing of information. Everybody has done so much work in the last couple of weeks. It's amazing now that we're now in the middle of September. We started this, you know, like less than 2 months ago. So I appreciate all the hard work that's been invested these past couple of weeks. I just wanted to go over a couple of announcements and next steps before we adjourn. So with respect to the public forums, as you may recall, we had 2 sets of public forums. On August 13th, we had our virtual public forum. August 18th, we had our virtual plus our 5 in-person forums that were held in Yonkers, White Plains, Mount Kisco, Peekskill, and New Rochelle. They are currently being in the process of being put together so that we can then release it as a package to everyone, including the public, and it will be available through the county social media links. So please stay tuned for that to be released pretty soon. We're also dedicating a section in the county executive's website to this particular task force so that the public may understand more about what the responsibilities of the task force is with respect to the executive order signed by the governor, It will also include a listing of every task force member. It will include a listing of our public meetings such as this one, and in addition to the public forums with the corresponding links to prior recordings of every meeting had, and also of the public forums. A reminder that our next task force meeting will be on Tuesday, October 6th from 3 to 5. Obviously, we will let you know far in advance with respect to what the agenda is, but it will include a reporting of each group with respect to what has been done from this time moving forward to October 6th. And last but not least, we are also getting ready to put together our second public forum. As you may recall, our goal was to have 2 public forums between July and December. The second one is going to be on Tuesday, October 27th, not the 26th as it was listed on the agenda. I apologize for that typo. So Tuesday, October 27th from 6 to 8 p.m. We are having these public forums in 3 different locations as opposed to the 5 initially that we had in August. So we're having one in Mount Vernon at the Dole Center, which will cover the southern part of the county. The northern part of the county will have ours in Cortland at the Muriel Morabito Community Center. And the White Plains one, which will cover the remaining portion of the county, will definitely be in White Plains. We are just confirming the location, whether it will be at the library or whether it will be at the Board of Elections in their conference room. We hope to have all of this wrapped up as soon as possible so that we can start to distribute flyers and that you may share these with your networks. And in addition to, obviously, to these in-person forums, we will also have the virtual forum and include and accept written testimony to our the corresponding email, which is policereformtf@westchester.gov.com.
Thank you. And before we break, I just want to thank everybody. I mean, we've done that a number of times, but I think certain things should be stated. And people have shared openly and honestly, and I think that that's essential if we're going to have something that's going to be successful. And also, there's been a tremendous amount of respect and a willingness to listen to some other people's ideas. I think that that's critical, and I think that that's going to help us to really arrive at a great set of recommendations. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that, and I know that particular areas are extremely important to all of us, but maybe more so to certain individuals, depending on what we're discussing. But the ability to agree to disagree and to sometimes even come back and listen again to someone else's ideas, possibly even adopt it, is tremendous. I think that that's a true testament to the working group and to our liaisons and to everyone who's working on this effort. So thank you.
Yes, and finally, I know that Mayo and I want to give a special thanks to the members of the county executive staff who acted as liaisons and made our job so much easier. And so we really appreciate it, and of course, we're going to appreciate it more as you go forward. And of course, we'll get things underway.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, anything else? Okay, once again, thank everyone, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Be well and be safe.